just happened at Tops grocery store. Exactly. So for some of you that aren't familiar, about 10 African Americans were murdered in this particular grocery store very, very recently. And because of this incident and other incidents we're going to discuss, mental health has become a hot topic, not only here in Arizona, but across the nation as well. Another incident has impacted our mental health across the nation is the recent school shooting in Uvalde, Texas. All these young people that you see on the screen were murdered in their school by a young man with obvious mental health issues. So not only did the young man have mental health issues, but what might be some of the impacts of this particular incident on the mental health of the parents of these young people, of the relatives of these young people, of the community in which these young people live in, of other parents like yourself and myself that have kids in school, and that, you know, seeing an incident like this brings up all kinds of concerns about our own children and their safety in schools. And could this happen to us? And how, you know, if it did happen, what would we do? How can we prevent it from happening? How could we prevent something like this from happening in our own community? Another recent incidents, all the Black Lives Matter protests, all the recent killings by cops that sparked this protest. You know, your George Floyd's, your Ahmaud Arbery's, Sandra Bland, and a multitude of other individuals that were either murdered by police officers or citizens, other citizens in their own communities. And those sorts of actions have sparked things like this, a whole movement that was not only here in this country, but it sparked a movement throughout the world where you're seeing a lot of people coming together in droves and getting in the streets and protesting these atrocities, right? These killings, and how must these killings be impacting their mental health, right? When you go to the store or you watch, right? You watch on TV a man die in front of you with a cop's knee on his neck for 7 minutes, and you watch this. These things have tremendous impact on our overall mental health, our overall psychological well-being. Just watching these things, right? And we've been inundated with these things for years and years and years and years. And not only have we been inundated with them, it's becoming more prolific because the more we access the information, the more opportunities we have to access the information, it gives us more opportunities to engage the information, right? And that information begins to impact us more and more and more, right? So not only do you have news and newspapers, which is kind of the old way, then you have TV, which you see these things on the news, then you have social media, you have Facebook, you carry around your phone, you receive messages about these things. We get alerts, right, from the government, right, on your phone. Everybody's phone goes off at one time because some things are going on. And all of these things have a significant toll on our mental health and our mental and psychological well-being. COVID. One of the biggest things that have occurred recently across the globe has impacted our mental health tremendously. How we interact with one another has been tremendously impacted by the pandemic, right? When I came in today, we talked about the church and how it's been redesigned as a result of COVID, right? And how things have been moved around, things have changed as a direct result of COVID. But being thrown into a pandemic in which you have to isolate. People you see every day, you no longer can see them, right? People you love, you no longer can go and contact them. Your children are no longer in school. They don't have the social interaction. We're watching many of our family members die. My father died from COVID in my home with me giving him CPR, right? And then I had to go to work, right? So that didn't stop my life from happening, but it impacted me significantly. And it certainly impacted my mental health because that was the first time I lost a parent, right? I'm sure it won't be the last. My mother's still alive, right? So, that's something that, is a possibility in the future. But just COVID in and of itself has impacted so many of us in so many ways. Some people have gotten sick and have long-term illnesses. I've lost 3 people directly in my family as a direct result of COVID. Got COVID, went in the hospital, died. Got COVID, went in the hospital, got out, got better, got sick again, went in the hospital, died, right? So this has directly impacted me like I'm sure it's impacted many of us, okay? So COVID is another thing in the pandemic that has had a tremendous impact on our overall mental health. The January 6th riots, right? This is another recent incident that has occurred that sparked a lot of conversation across the nation and the world about mental health, right? And where we are as a nation with regard to our mental health, and how could people get to a point where they would be willing to do something like this, which is attack their own capital of the country that they live in. So this act in and of itself has not only sparked conversations about mental health, but it's also sparked a lot of other conversations, right? They're in court now. There's the trials going on and things like that. So it sparked a whole lot of other conversations. But one of the big conversations was surrounding mental health and the mental health of our nation. If you watch this when it was happening on January 6th, there were a lot of things that were going on that would make you question, right? The mental health of not only the people that were involved, but possibly some of our leaders because of some of the behaviors that they were engaged in, and what must their mental health been like at the time when they make certain decisions. Even, Mike Pence, right? Being under the threat of death, having a noose, having the crowd scream, bring out Mike Pence. We want to hang Mike Pence, right? How must that have impacted his mental health? Just looking at him as an individual, right? So mental health was impacted by this particular event on a lot of ways, through a lot of people. A lot of people were impacted by it. People, just me watching this, right, impacted me in my mental health and my sense of safety and well-being, right? So all of those things are involved in mental health, and incidents like this and some of the others we discussed definitely impact our mental health as a nation, right? Okay. This one might hit home a little bit for those of us that are here today, because if you're unfamiliar, all 9 of these beautiful people were murdered in a place just like the place we're sitting in today. They were all murdered in a church while they were praying, right? So how must an incident like that impact people like you, right? How does that impact your feeling of safety when you come to a house of worship, right? How must that impact your desire to want to include outsiders, when you're worshiping, right? In a lot of different ways, situations like this impact us and impact our mental health. How does a situation like this impact you and even coming to church, right? A lot of people, because of this incident, stop coming to church. They're scared to come to church, right? Because something like this happened. So incidents like this, incidents like the things that we touched on earlier, are one of the primary reasons that mental health has become much more of a greater focus today. So oftentimes you turn on the radio, everybody's talking about mental health. There's books about mental health. You got celebrities having podcasts about mental health. You got Taraji P. Henson starting a mental health coalition or something of that nature. But all of these incidents impact mental health and its kind of resurgence or interest in mental health, amongst the public today. So incidents like this one and the ones we discussed are why mental health is such a hot topic today. All right, so what is mental health? So in general, mental health includes our emotional, psychological, and social well-being, okay? So mental health in generally is your sense of well-being. Like we talked about the church shooting, your sense of well-being being in a church after witnessing an incident like that, after hearing about an incident like that, after seeing an incident like that on TV, online, what have you. How's that impacted your overall sense of well-being, your emotional well-being, your psychological well-being, and your social well-being, okay? Because emotionally, we all have to feel for those individuals, right? So we all were impacted by that. I can't say everybody, let me back up. Most of us were impacted by that on an emotional level. And psychologically, most of us, again, We're impacted by that on a psychological level because now we're measuring our steps. We're probably more cautious when we come into places of worship. We're paying more attention of those around us. Maybe we're not closing our eyes all the way when we pray. Maybe, we keep it one eye open. Maybe there's security in your church now, right? Maybe people think there should be security in your church now, and that could be a thing. But those sorts of incidents impact our mental health. And again, mental health includes your emotional, psychological, and social well-being, all right? So why is mental health important at all? Besides the incidents that we talked about, mental health is important because it affects how we think, how we feel, how we act at every stage of our life, from childhood and adolescence all the way through adulthood. So the importance of mental health can't be understated, all right? It affects every aspect of our life from we were little kids all the way through adulthood, all right? And it also helps determine how we handle stress, how we relate to others, and how we make healthy choices, right? So having good, appropriate mental health in witnessing a church shooting, for instance, will impact how you handle that and how you process that. Will you process that in a more fearful way, or will you process that from a more proactive way, from a more healthy frame of reference, okay? All right. So why is mental health important for people of color and other marginalized groups? Studies suggest that racial minority groups and sexual minority groups show higher levels of anxiety, depression, suicidal tendencies, post-traumatic stress disorder, and other mental health disorders, in large part due to society's deep-rooted prejudice towards such stigmatized and marginalized groups, okay? So in general, people of color and other marginalized groups have higher levels of mental health issues because they're a part of these marginalized groups, and they have to deal with the stigmatization and marginalization that comes with being a part of these groups. And that can be people in color in general, people from different sexual orientations, people from different minority groups, all right? We have higher incidences of mental health disorders and mental health illness and psychological difficulties. All right, taking it one step further, why is mental health important for African American communities in particular? Because typically with most things challenging, they're more challenging for African Americans for a host of reasons, right? They're more challenging for our communities, and it's the same with mental health and psychological health issues. We have more in our community than is typically recognized in other communities, okay? So the Black community suffers from an increased rate of mental health concerns and increased incidence of psychological difficulties due to the following. Lack of access to appropriate and culturally responsive mental health care. I've been a psychologist for over 25 years. I started my private practice in 2017. 95% of the calls I get, they ask me, am I Black? Sometimes I make a joke about it because they see my picture and they still ask me, am I Black? Right? So I have to tell them, yes, yeah, I know I'm a little fair-skinned, but yes, I am Black. But why do people ask me that, right? Because they want someone that's culturally responsive. They want someone that can validate their experiences. I'm from Philadelphia, and moving to Arizona was a culture shock, right? So just in coming here, I found myself questioning a lot of my everyday experiences. Did that person just get in front of me like I wasn't standing here? Or did they just not see me, right? Or did they see me and intentionally step in front of me? So there's questions that I would ask. Go to a restaurant. Seems like I've been sitting here for quite some time and others haven't. Are they intentionally ignoring me because I'm African American? Or, are they just busy, right? But these are some of the questions that we ask and some of the questions that we have in general, and a lot of the same questions my clients have. And they want someone that can say, yeah, they probably did see you and stepped in front of you in line like you weren't there. That's a common thing. I have people that, go to work and they have challenges at work and they come to me and they want to know, are those challenges real? Or are they being a little bit overly sensitive about what's happening? Am I, kind of reaching for things? Am I seeing something that's not there? And when I tell them that, they're probably not seeing something that's not there. There's probably some of what they're experiencing actually going on that helps validate their experience. It helps normalize that experience, and then they're able to deal with it in a different way, in a more healthy way, as opposed to thinking there's something wrong with them. They can look at the experience for what it is and deal with it for exactly what it is and approach it in a better way. Prejudice and racism inherent in the daily environments of Black individuals. That's another reason why mental health is so important for African Americans in particular. We just celebrated Juneteenth, Juneteenth National Independence Celebration for Black folks, right? So I went to Washington, D.C., and I thought it was a good idea to go to the African American History Museum. Never been there. Beautiful place. If you never went, go check it out. But just that experience of being in that environment. So I'm going on vacation. I go to the African American History Museum. Just that experience of being in that environment brought up feelings of prejudice and racism, right? Because you're in the museum and you're experiencing these moments in history. You're experiencing these moments in time from slavery. You're reading the words. You're seeing the imagery. You're hearing the sounds. So you begin to relive some of these things. You begin to relive some of the prejudices. You begin to feel some of the things that maybe some of the people that went through those things were feeling. I know when I started listening to they had a video of Malcolm X. I got angry. I got really, really angry, and I was, in a good way.
Were you able to walk into the Emmett Till room?
I was.
I couldn't go in.
You couldn't go?
No.
It
was too much.
Well, this is the thing. You could see what's in the casket on the outside of the room. Okay. So, the Emmett Till room, if you're unaware, is a room that they have in the African American History Museum, and they actually have a casket, and then they have a picture of Emmett Till in the casket that you can look at, and as well as a bunch of other pictures, around the casket of the mom, the funeral, and things like that. That tells the story of Emmett Till and how he was murdered. It shows us, before and after images and things like that. But just, prejudice and racism inherent in our daily environments impacts our mental health, especially here in Arizona, right? Especially here in Arizona. It's difficult for African Americans here in Arizona on a day-to-day, regular schmegular basis, right? I find myself, and I'm a doctor, okay? I've been doing this for a long time, but I find myself questioning a lot of things that happen in my daily commute, in my daily environment, as do a lot of my clients, right? They question these things just because of the inherent, prejudice and racism that exists in the environment. Historical trauma enacted on Black communities is another reason why mental health is important amongst Black communities. Historically, we have an aversion to the sciences and getting medical attention. Why? Because things like the Tuskegee experiment, right, where they allowed us to carry certain disease to see how things went. We oftentimes in our communities, we don't trust mental health professionals. We don't trust medical professionals because of the historical trauma enacted on Black communities by the medical professionals, by scientific professionals. And on top of that, we don't trust medical professionals because, what are we told, right? I know what I was told, family business stays where? In the house, in the family, right? So if you feeling sad and depressed because mama and daddy fighting or whatever, you don't run out and tell no doctor that your mama and daddy fighting and you feel sad and depressed. We're not taught to do those things, right? Right? We taught to keep it in the house. And in some ways that has been functional for us at a point in history, but in a lot of ways it's become a dysfunction, right? Because it denies us the opportunity to get help that we actually need and could benefit from. But historical trauma enacted on the Black community still to this day impacts how, when, or if we even access mental health services. Mental health needs that are often exacerbated and mostly unfulfilled. It's another reason why mental health is important to African American communities. Again, oftentimes because our relationship with the medical community and the mental health community, our needs are often unfulfilled, right? So we'll have problems, we don't get help, those needs become unfulfilled. When one need becomes unfulfilled, I'm depressed, I don't get that checked on, so I'm not going to work as much, right? So then I'm calling out. So then what happens? My financial situation might get exacerbated, right? If my financial situation gets exacerbated, maybe I can't afford the house that I'm living in, right? So then my living situation gets exacerbated. So everything gets compounded because we don't deal with we don't deal with mental health issues, right? Our mental health issues go untreated, right? Because we don't either go to the doctors, we can't access doctors, or just the stigma that's associated with getting that type of help. And lastly, issues related to economic insecurity and the associated experiences such as violence, criminal justice, they all farther serve to compound the mental health disparities in the Black population, right? So not having enough money, experiences associated with that. You know, so you live in neighborhoods that have high crime rates, that have high rates of violence, that have high rates of sexual promiscuity, that have low rates of church attendance, right? That have low education success rates and things like that. So all those things serve to exacerbate the mental health challenges in the Black community and make our challenges mental health-wise a little bit more difficult as a community. Okay.
Dr. Logan, before you
ma'am.
move on, I want to, because I know you're going to go to strategies, I want you to hear what he's saying, and I know our virtual audience is also hearing that. He's painting the picture of what we deal with on a regular basis. He's acknowledging the fact that he started off by talking about real life situations. When he and I talked, you know, I said, bring it home, bring it to what we're dealing with today, and unfortunately may deal with tomorrow, because we don't know what's going to happen out there. He's talking about not only the situations, but he's also talking about how it has impacted the African American community, how it has impacted us and our children. How, and I'm not taking it from you, but how I think you talked about, you know, what we see, and I think some of the things he shared, if you notice, he said the police officers, he said other people killing other people. I don't know about you, but I know, and I'm young. Okay, let's go there. Okay. So anyway, back in the day, in the not so far away day, I remember police officers were our friends. These were people that we could go up to and talk to and have fun. And I was just recently traveling as well. I was in Michigan, and I was at a Juneteenth event, just so happened to be at my family's house at the Juneteenth event. And my nephew, because my family was shooting off firecrackers in a neighborhood that wasn't of color, because that's where they lived, but my nephew ran over to me and started crying. And I said, "Are you afraid of the firecrackers?" And he says, "No." He says, "Auntie, look outside." There were 10 police officers, 10 police cars. And I said, "Oh my God, what's going on?" Because the time of day and the fact that they were shooting off these firecrackers, they had 10 police cars coming up to this house, our house. And he cried and he kept crying, and everyone was trying to console him. And his fear was of the police officers. That affected his mental health. That affected how he sees what we grew up with as someone who is safe and secure for us. So I want you all to, and I know he's going to get into the strategies, and again, I'm hoping those in the virtual area listen to this as well. I want you to hear the picture that he's painting. I want you to see that we can't see the broken leg. We can see the broken leg, we can see the broken arm, we can see the gunshot wound, we can see the scars. But as he's even pointed out, and he's a friend of mine, and I wasn't even aware of the situation you dealt with during the pandemic, we can't see what people are actually dealing with and what they're going through in their head. We can come to church and we can smile and we praise God, and God is actually the head of our life. But when we walk out that door, what are our people going through? And that's why it's so important. Some of the strategies that he's about to share, I want you to be able to take this information and look at the recording and share it with your family, because I want to make sure that we understand that there's a lot that goes on up here, that a lot that goes on throughout what we're dealing with. And one of the things you share with Dr. Logan, this picture here is called Social Determinants of Health. Look it up. It is all of those areas, whether we look at education, whether we look at healthcare access, whether we look at financial situation, whether we look at the social environment. We go to work every day and we are working around an environment. But when we leave that environment, where are we going and who are we dealing with and what do we have to face? And I'm going to end, because I can keep going, and you know me, but I'm going to end by saying this. How can we leave our home, and I do it on a regular basis, and leave my workplace, and when I leave my workplace, I'm driving and I'm not bothered. But then I can drive home in my car and be followed by a police officer only because of where I live and what I drive. That's a mental health concern. That's mentally affecting me and hopefully causing me to be able to not function or do what I need to do on a regular basis. There have been times I've actually driven home and said, dang it, I forgot to go to the bank because this cop was following me. That's a mental health concern, right? So I want you to listen to some of the strategies.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that's, before we get into the strategy, I think that's an important point, Dr. Allen, that mental health is insidious, right? Oftentimes it's happening to us, and mental health challenges are insidious, right? Oftentimes when they're happening, we're unaware until they get to a point where they show themselves in a big way, right? And it becomes big because we, wasn't paying attention. We seen the cop behind us, so now we're missing things, and that impacted us. We had a racist incident, perhaps, at work, or something we thought, was racist, or just didn't sit right with us, and that impacted us. And these things happen. Somebody stepped in front of us at line. We went to get gas, and as if you weren't there. As if you were invisible, and that impacted us, and we're questioning, well, did they see me, did they not, as we talked about earlier. These things are cumulative. They build up, and then when they finally reveal themselves, we find ourselves in the midst of a mental health crisis, right? But I want to make a small distinction. A lot of things that we experience are normal parts of life, right? So being sad, that's a normal part of life. The distinction between, being sad and being depressed is the intensity, duration, and how much it has an impact on your life. So I think a lot of times when we talk about mental health, we need to make that distinction, because some people say, well, I'm sad, I'm depressed, right? And then when you talk to them about it and why they're sad or why they're upset, or I just lost a parent, right? Well, that's normal, right? So some of the things that we experience with regard to our mental health and some of the challenges, not some of the good things, being upset, being anxious about things, perhaps. Those things can be normal under the right circumstances. But when they start having a negative impact on your overall sense of well-being, when you start questioning things, when you're missing things in your daily commute because you're concerned that you might get pulled over by this cop and you don't know what's going to happen, they could take you to jail, you're a female, but that don't matter, because if you look at Sandra Bland and what happened with her, you know what I mean? So some of the things that you thought could protect you in the past, no longer seem to be protective factors. And then these things start having a significant and major impact on your life. That's when, we're in the midst of possible a mental health concern, a mental health crisis, or a mental health issue. Normal things like everyday anxiety because you have a presentation, being upset because you lost a pet or you lost a loved one, you lost a job, perhaps. Those things are normal, but again, the distinction is when it has a significant impact on your overall well-being, or your quality of life, or your everyday life, then you might be talking more about, a psychological or possible mental health issue, okay? But with that said, let's talk a little bit about some of the things that we can do so we can help improve our mental health, okay? All right, so one of the first things we can do is think about our safety first, right? So taking stock in what gives you a sense of security and comfort, and making concerted effort to incorporate those things into your everyday life, right? So although the church thing happened, if church is the place that gives you security and comfort, this is a place that you should be, okay? Is exercising is something that gives you security and comfort, then that's something that you should do. If hanging out with friends, there was a shooting at a movie theater. I believe Batman was playing, not too long ago. I know I enjoy going to the movies, right? And a lot of people enjoy going to the movie. That's a place of comfort, right? Don't stop doing the things that are comforting to you because these big things happen, these tragic things happen, these crazy things happen. Take your safety into account, but take stock of the things that give you security and comfort, and make sure you're making a concerted effort to incorporate those things into your daily life. If talking to family members give you a sense of security and comfort, then incorporate that into your daily life. Exercising gets you a sense of security and comfort, incorporate that into your daily life. If traveling with friends and not alone gives you a sense of security and comfort, incorporate those things into your daily life. But whatever the things are that helps you feel secure and make you comfortable, continue to do those things and make a concerted effort to make sure those things are part of your everyday life, okay? Another thing we could do is focus on what's in your control, right? Taking the first step, worry about the rest after. A lot of times when we think about some of the recent incidents that, I brought up earlier, we get very scared. We get very afraid. We don't want to do things. Well, I don't want to go to the movies no more. Well, I don't want to send my kid to school. I'm concerned about that. Or, well, maybe I'm not going to drive down that street anymore because I know the cops might follow me or something of that nature. A lot of those things we can't control. We can't control, one, you're going to be black, right? You can't change that, right? So that's something that just is. And we can't control many times what comes along with that. A lot of good stuff comes along with that, to be sure. But some challenges also come along with that. And a lot of things that we see, the police brutality, the murders, the racism, the prejudice, those oftentimes are things that are out of our control. So in terms of having appropriate mental health, we can't focus on the things that, well, we can, but we should focus on the things that we have more control over. Okay? How you do things, when you do things, where you do things. You don't have to go to places that might be inherently or more likely to have a certain amount of racism or prejudice in them. We know certain places in and around Arizona where we get love, and we know other places where we get dress coded, right? Easy, and the dress code is very specific to African Americans and keeping us out of certain environments. So we know, right, inherently based on our day-to-day, where we're accepted and where we're not. So being aware of those places and, focus on the things you can control. You can control where you go to spend your money at, right? You don't got to keep going to the same place if you had a bad experience there, right? If it was a negative experience, go somewhere else. Spend your money elsewhere. Okay, so focus on the things that you control, the things that you can't control. We pray about those things, and we give it to God, and we wish for the best. But another strategy for maintaining good mental health is things that's out of control is out of control. Things that's in your control, focus on those. Right. All right. Another strategy. One of the things we talked about, and I think this is probably one of the bigger ones, even for me. And I'm sure a lot of you. My mother is 72 years old. She spends more time on the internet, right, and social media than most younger folks I know, than a lot of younger folks I know, right? And there's a lot to be said about some of the inherent good things that can occur from social media. We get a chance to reconnect. And Dr. Allen told me today, as we were talking, preparing for this, that through social media, she's able to reconnect with some of her students in the past and stay up to date on things that's happening in their lives, both good and bad. So social media has its good aspects, but oftentimes than not, social media wears us down, right? And before you know it, it can put you in a bad space mentally, okay? What? Yeah.
And I was going to say, I logged off of Facebook and social media about a year ago, and it has been really refreshing. I get so much done. I'll log in and check on people, but sometimes we have to remove ourselves from that environment. I think as a mental health thing, it gives us, it makes our mind healthy because people, and even in a not so great picture, people, oh, you look good when you know you don't.
Right.
But then there are also times when you're reading and you're especially during the January the 6th. I peeked in Facebook recently, and it was like a list of things about January 6th. I got off because a lot of the information that was shared on January 6th was not accurate. Mm-hmm. And then when you look at CNN, you get information in real time. So that's important. So yes, taking time off of social media is very important.
Right. I think this is one of the biggest ones, right? So I, too, Dr. Allen, take what I call social media vacations, right? Try it sometimes. And you can really see the difference. I mean, I promise you. Stop using social media for about a month. Okay, make it more difficult. One of the things I do to make it more difficult for myself to use social media is I remove well, it's still on my phone, but it's not on my home screen. Right. Oh, he took it all the way off the phone. I still have it on the phone, right? Because it serves some utility for me. But I make it a little bit harder for me to access, right? So as opposed to as soon as my phone come on, it's right there and I just press it. I got to go flip a couple times before I get to the app to get to it. So that makes me less likely to go to social media and less likely to spend time on it. But I think taking a social media vacation on a regular basis, logging off social media accounts, moving social media icons from home screen on your phone, all the things that are extremely healthy. I think this is one of the best things that we can do as adults, and this is one of the best things that we can do for our children, right? If you have kids, maybe when I was young, I don't know about you, Dr. No. when we were young, we spent time outside, right? We didn't have screens and things like that. We had the TV, but that's about it. And that cut off at midnight. Like, it literally cut off. Like, it was nothing. It was a flag and, the Star
For,
Spangled
for
Banner or
physical
something.
health, I'm going to put a plug in. Don't spend time outside in Arizona for the social media. 115 degrees.
Well, it's nice places. That you just got to do it early, right? You just got to go early or go up north. But the point is, to take social media holidays and be very intentional about this, okay? Not just for yourself, but for your kids. We are inundated so much with negative media through social media that it can impact our mental health. And the other part of that is, this is a bigger part of it, not even the negative stuff, right? The good stuff we see, right? Dr. Allen just got a 5 new red cars. She's doing so good. And right? Well, I didn't know. I was just making it up. I did just see that you told on yourself, right? But oftentimes, people post the good things that are happening to them, right? They don't post a lot of the bad stuff that's going on. So then we get to doing what? We get to comparison. We compare. And then we feel bad about what's going on in our life because it appears everyone else around us is doing so good, okay? And that impacts our mental health. Because now we're not feeling good about our goals. We're not feeling good about our accomplishments. We're not feeling good about our successes. We're not even feeling good about our kids sometimes because, such and such kid is a little child actor or actress and they're in a Disney movie or, they're this fantastic gymnast or, my kid, he's just learning timetables right now. What's wrong with my child? So social media can have a negative impact on our psychological well-being in that way as well, right? Because of the images people portray of themselves on social media. And most of the time it's just good stuff. You get a lot of people that tell about a lot of negative stuff going on, but most people, they want to paint a very rosy picture of their life. They're doing so good. They're so successful. And then we start questioning, well, I'm the same age. I'm just as smart. I'm just as attractive. I'm just as this. My kids are just as smart. My kids are just as X, Y, and Z. So then we start questioning why not me? Why not our kids, right? Maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe I'm not as smart as I thought I was. Well, maybe I can't open that business because I've been trying to do it for so long. And here Dr. Allen just in 1 month, she opened a business when we don't know it took Dr. Allen 3 years, right, to do what she did. We just seen it because she just posted it on social media, right? But she's been working on this thing 3-4 years. But that's the flip side of social media. So social media breaks, social media vacations, removing icons off the home screen, timing your kids out. We just found out that you can really control every aspect of your iPad. I have a 10-year-old daughter that's very savvy, and I'll leave it there. But she's so savvy that her mother and I, we've really had to start looking at ways to control what she has access to, right? Because a lot of it has a negative impact on her mental health. And to your point, Dr. Allen, when you said the kid, was worried about the cops, my daughter had this similar experience, right? When a lot of the Black Lives Matter stuff was going on, her fear was police. That brought tears to my eyes. To hear her say that she was scared of police because she was watching all of these things that were going on, right? If she wanted to or not, it was coming on the news, it was on social media, it was everywhere. She was surrounded by it. So she developed a fear of police because of it. So this is probably one of the most important things that you can do, taking that social media vacation on a regular basis, okay? Even if it's just a week, log off, take time off, move the icons from the home screen. Practice mindful news literacy. All right, this goes again with the social media. Identifying credible and trustworthy news. And Dr. Allen, you spoke about this. Everything you see ain't always accurate, right? So being able to identify credible and trustworthy news and information, and identifying how our emotions and well-being factor into participation with news media, right? So a lot of times, when we have high anxiety and we're watching things, the things that we watch impact our emotions and our sense of well-being, right? And then we seek out other things that support that, right? So, and not only do we seek it out, the algorithm on the social media seeks it out, and it feeds that, okay? So whatever the things that you're responding to the most emotionally, those are the things that's going to show up in your news feed, right? If you're looking up things about, depression and anxiety, and you're really responding to these ads or responding to these sorts of posts, guess what you're going to see? More posts about depression and anxiety, more things that elicit those types of emotions, okay? So we all have to be very intentional about practicing mindful news literacy. And that's basically just being mindful about the things that you consume, the news and information that you consume. A lot of times we see things and we'll take it as truth, because maybe Dr. Allen posted it. She's Dr. Allen, take it as truth. Sometimes we got to look things up, right? And we got to fact check. Most of the time, we should fact check. It doesn't matter if a friend posted it, if Dr. Logan posted it, if Dr. Allen, if Dr. anybody posted it, it doesn't matter. I have a friend that's a fire chief in Philadelphia. And he, I forget, it was a popular story going around, and he posted it. And the story was totally untrue, right? But he's a fire chief in Philadelphia, so people pay attention to the things that he posted. So then he had to go back after he found out it wasn't true and kind of retract, the post. But that goes into practicing mindful news literacy. A lot of things is programming, is algorithms. There's a computer out there paying attention to everything that you do, everything you search online, everything you Google, everything you check in your phone, every time you go on Facebook, every time you go on Instagram, every time you shop on Amazon, every time you do anything online at all, there's a computer out there collecting that information and developing the algorithm to sell you something, to put certain information in your face, okay? So you have to be mindful of that, and you have to practice mindful news literacy and be able to filter those things out as a way to, to counteract those things. And then, again, to be more mindful about being mentally and psychologically healthy, okay? Understanding that these things that you're getting is programming. So you might have to seek out some different information from some different sources. Look at the other side, right? A lot of the information I got from January 6th didn't come from CNN. It came from watching right-wing news sources where they had cameras, and they was right there. They was following them. I mean, they had their phones out, and they followed it start to finish, right on the spot. And you can get a bird's eye view of what happened. It's not news media, it's regular people that's involved in that. So, getting information from different sides, maybe that you might not necessarily agree with, but getting that information as a basis of comparison for the information that you are receiving, okay? Because, just because it comes from, what we consider a trusted news source, don't necessarily make it true, okay? It doesn't, unfortunately, right? Because it's all a business, and we all customers, okay? So practice mindful news literacy and news consumption. Practice healthy avoidance, simply avoiding sources, media, and people that trigger you. Triggers are things that can lead to adverse emotional reactions, such as stress and anxiety. All right? So healthy avoidance, sometimes, we like to engage with people, but those people can be triggers for emotional reactions, stress, and anxiety. I had a friend that I went to school with, went to college with, and we were friends online on social media, and she is a diehard Republican, Trump fan, and she just as black, and she love him to death, love him to death. And I mean, she's entitled to do that. That's fine, but it was so much so that she would post things that were triggering to me, right? So when the pandemic started, and I think they sent boats, like warships, to New York, and those warships were going to be used as hospitals, I believe, at the beginning of the pandemic, right? Well, her theory was they were sending them there to rescue sex trafficked kids and lock up all the elites, and that's why those ships were there. They weren't really hospitals, and this is the type of information that she was sharing online, and I took personal offense to it because I'm like, no, I don't think that's true. I think it's some other things. She didn't believe COVID was COVID before it came out. Like, oh, it's a conspiracy. No, it's not happening, and it's a red flag. These people aren't dying. I said, Miss, my father just died in my house. I watched him. I gave him CPR, right? Like, and he died of COVID. I mean, I watched it. She didn't believe it. Like, so she was very triggering to me. So I had to unfriend her, right? But I would engage every day because she would lock me in with something she would post. And I was like, oh my God, are you serious? But I had to learn to practice healthy avoidance, okay? Healthy avoidance. And then whether that's somebody online that you're friends with, it could be a family member, it could be a coworker, anyone, right? If they are triggering to you emotionally, if you're having strong visceral reactions to them, if you feel stressed out when you're around them or overly anxious when you're around them, you know that they're triggered. That's a sign. That's your body telling you that they're a trigger to you. And you might want to avoid them if you can in some capacity. So practicing healthy avoidance is another good strategy. Connection is key. Making time for relationships, looking to your family, friends, community groups such as church, and co-workers can provide you with social and emotional support you might be needing when life throws curveballs your way, right? So the on the opposite end of avoidance, right, and healthy avoidance is community, okay? And how do you incorporate your community into your daily life to promote better mental health, okay? One thing that the pandemic taught the world is that we're not meant to be alone, right? We're not. We're social beings by nature. And when you take that away, people start falling apart quick, right? Kids don't know how to be kids no more. They don't, right? They don't know what's going on. They upset, they sad. We have all these different issues because we can't interact with, our loved ones. We're communicating through windows, with our elderly, right? Because we're scared to, maybe give them, COVID or some, kind of disease or expose them to something like that. So
And
that's
Dr.
what
Logan, I was going to say, Pastor points that out often in his recent message, Genesis 2:18, man is not meant to be alone. And I think we witnessed that, during the pandemic, whether you live alone, whether you were alone, some way or another, God made a way for social media, Facebook. People learned how to use FaceTime, Zoom, all of those different avenues in order for them to connect. We found that during that time we had Zoom family gatherings during the holiday and got to know that everyone was okay. So you're right. That connection is key. It's very important, and it does help with your mental health. So that's good that you
absolutely.
pointed that out.
I think this is one of the biggest ones too, right? Having those healthy connections, though, right? Having healthy connections, because the pandemic did teach us that. A friend of mine came and lived with me because she didn't want to be stuck in the house by herself. Like, no, we good friends. I'm bringing the kids. I'm packing bags. We coming over. Till this pandemic thing gets figured out, right? To the world, we figure out what's going on in the world. That was, at the early stages. So those connections are important. Maintaining connections with the church, maintaining connections with people you meet here, family, friends, good co-workers, all of those things, different community groups. If you don't have somebody, find somebody. That's one thing social media is good for. There's a lot of groups. There's a lot of groups that, do everything that you can think of, okay? So make connections. Make as many good connections as you can make, because when challenges happen, when life throws you a curveball, when pandemics happen, when, prejudice and racism and all these things, find their way to your doorstep, having someone in your support group to talk to can be more valuable than you realize, okay? So definitely having those connections, making time for relationships with your family, friends, community groups, co-workers, and social members at church as well. It's definitely one of the good keys to positive mental health. Taking a moment for yourself, right? So sometimes, we got to take time alone. So while those connections are important, sometimes being alone is important, right? Especially if when unexpected changes show up, it can be essential to a healthy and being, I can't even read right now. Time alone is especially important when unexpected changes show up and can be essential to strong well-being. Doing activity and seeking out a moment of your solitude can be rejuvenating and can offer a space to reflect on current situations, right? A lot of times, we're around people and others so much, we don't have time to get in our own thoughts or be with our own thoughts, right? Prior to me coming here, I had a client. I do private practice work, and I had a client. And that's one of the things we talked about, him being able to be with his own thoughts, which he hasn't been able to do all his life. That's a scary place to be for him. And a lot of us, right? If we're in our heads too long, we start thinking of, things we did in the past, what did I did wrong, and I shouldn't have did that, and all the mistakes we made, all the challenges we have, and then we get down on ourselves because we're our hardest critics a lot of times. But having that healthy time alone to kind of reflect, think of your successes, some of the challenges you have, but what are successes that I've made, the challenges that I've come through can be rejuvenating and help you get through challenging mental health times. Okay. Breaking the sweat. Exercise is always a good thing to do, okay? Whether it's swimming, walking, riding the bike, chasing kids around the yard, exercising gets the heart pumping, is especially important when you for taking care of yourself. Physical and mental health are tied together. They're not exclusive things, right? So what does that mean? When you don't feel well physically, you laid up in the hospital, typically you're not in the best of spirits, right? Emotionally, right? If you're having health problems, if you got to get a bad health diagnosis, you're not in the best of places emotionally. So, having that physical exercise and things like that can also help with bettering your mental health. This one can't be underestimated. Having a schedule, right? Having a daily schedule, scheduling your day, your daily routine. Oftentimes, people don't use the thing right in their pocket. I tell my clients all the time, use your phone. Use that calendar in your phone. It has alarms, right? When you don't have things on schedule, you're trying to keep track of things in your head. You find yourself scrambling around. You're missing appointments. You're not doing this. You're not doing that. What happens when that happens? It creates a heightened level of stress and anxiety, okay? And so your mental health is not as strong because you're stressed out, you're anxious, you're trying to figure out what you're doing with your day and so on and so forth. So use scheduling your routines, having a daily routine. If you don't have one, get one. Maybe you're not working right now. Maybe you're a stay-at-home father or a stay-at-home mother. Have a daily routine. Write it down, put it on your calendar.
And not only your phone, but also your work calendar. What I put on my work calendar, because anything that's free, somebody's going to make a meeting. And so I always put private appointment. That private appointment can be anything. Going to the store, going to the gym, running an errand, and spending time by myself, because you have to do that. You have to do that so that your coworkers would know that, this is a time that's not available for them.
Exactly. And for all of y'all that was like me and y'all still use pencil and paper, please stop. Go on and use that phone. Go on and use it. I tell you, it's magical. I promise you, your calendar on your phone is much better than that daily planner you have. All right. All right, get some sleep. We can't underestimate sleep. Sleep is important. If you're not rested, you're going to be anxious, stressed, and all kinds of other things. Sleep deprivation is one of the ways they conduct warfare. Right? They keep people woke. They play loud music so you can't sleep because it impacts your mental health in a significant way. If you're not asleep, you're not able to rejuvenate physically or mentally. So get some sleep. All right, breathe, right? Taking deep breaths through your nose, breathing out through your mouth, that puts oxygen in your brain, okay, and gets things flowing. All right, so get outside, take a couple deep breaths. It feels really good. Deep breathing helps to slow down your heart rate and delivers calming oxygen throughout the body. So breathing, although it may seem simple, is very important. And we're running out of time, so I'm gonna step through these real quick. Reattach, detach, repeat, meaning let go of things, take time to just take breaks, devote a couple of minutes at the start of each day to reflecting and setting up work goals. Reattaching can help focus and energize you, which can lead to deeper engagement and productivity. Similarly, consider disconnecting or detaching at the end of the day. Leave work at work, right? If you can. I know a lot of us can't, but if you can leave work at work, leave it at work. It ain't going nowhere. All right? It'll be waiting for you tomorrow. I promise you. Okay? It'll be there. All right. All right. And lastly, this is just a little diagram on a quick way to check where you are in terms of your overall mental health, what zone you're in. If you're kind of in the fear zone, you're doing things like grabbing food, toilet paper, medication you don't need. You spread emotions related to fear and anger. You complain frequently. You forward all messages you receive. You get mad easily. So that's not necessarily a good place to be in with regard to your overall mental health. Moving forward to the learning zone, you're in the learning zone when you start to get up things you can't control, right? We talked about that. Focusing on the things you can't control, leave that to God. But just focus on things you can control, is an indication that you're in the learning zone. Stop compulsively consuming what hurts from food to news, okay? We talked about that. Mindful avoidance, being intentional about your social media intake and the news that you intake. Being able to identify your emotions helps you mentally and lets you know that you're in a learning zone, okay? Being able to identify what you're feeling and why you're feeling it. Becoming aware of the situation and how to think and act in particular situations. Evaluating information before spreading something false, right? We talked about that. Oftentimes we get information from algorithms and it looked good and it sounds good and it fits with our belief system, so we post it and we could be all the way wrong, it could be all the way false. So evaluating information before sharing that. Recognizing that we all trying to do our best, right? We all out here trying to do our best in these streets, right? Everybody trying to do good. Everybody. Sometimes now we go in restaurants, it takes extra long. And instead of getting upset about that, recognize that, everybody's out here trying to do their best. And show people grace. Show people grace. Bigger than showing people grace, show yourself grace. Okay? Understand that we all trying to make it and get things done. You're in the growth zone when you can think of others and see how to help them, when you're making your talents available to those who need them, when you're living in the present and you're focused on the future. So you ain't worried about what happened in the past, you're living right now and today. You can be empathetic with yourself, again, showing grace to yourself and others. You thank and appreciate others for all the small things you did. So thank you for letting me come here, for instance, right? I thank and appreciate y'all for the opportunity. Keeping a happy emotional state and spreading hope. Right? Things are terrible right now, but I believe we're going to make it, right? It was tragedy what happened at that school, but I believe we're going to get better with that. I believe things are going to be better at the end of the day. So just having that mindset, that positive, happy, emotional state and spreading hope, looking for a way to adapt to new changes. You got to adapt to new changes because everything is changing. Nothing is the same as even yesterday, right? Things change all the time. I just was flying, nobody's wearing masks, right? Because it's not, well, people are, but it's not mandatory, so things are changing and you have to adapt, all right? So looking for ways to adapt to new changes and practicing quietude, that's time to yourself, patience, right? Relationships and creativity. So when you're doing those things, you're in the growth zone. Dr. Allen.
Before you go to the next slide, I want, if it's okay with you, to take a picture of this. I think it's so important. One of the things that I know we'll do, we'll remember this. We will probably look at the video later and look at it again. But oftentimes when you are working, whether you're on Zoom, whether you're in meetings in person, whether you're sitting in an area where you're not being waited on because you're waiting on a meal, if you look at this, and I took my picture, and thank you, Sister Cheryl Daniels. She said, just in case you didn't get it, I'm giving it to you. This here speaks volumes because it lets us know what zone we're in and how we can adapt. Sometimes you'll see me in the church, and trust me, this is how I adapt. I'll say, thank you. I'll smile, and I'm nodding. It's not fake. It's real, because that's how I keep myself balanced. Though I may be busy, There may be some stressful moments. I may have left a death in the hospital. I may have heard about, as I was sharing with Dr. Logan, one of my former students committed suicide this morning, and I get a call while I'm presenting at the hospital in front of a group of people. And I had to regroup, continue to present, make a call to the students back at home, and keep going and pray for that individual. Sometimes when we, in our inner self, find ourselves in this area, what he just said, I want you to hear what he said. He said, growth zone, I thank you and appreciate others. I appreciate you all having me here. This is what he said. He could have said, you know what, I just got off the plane, I'm tired, and I really don't want to be here. How do you think that's going to make him feel? But he didn't, and I think that's what we have to think about. I'm not trying to ask you to think like me. I'm just trying to merely think about what he said, Dr. Logan said, and how it impacts your inner self to make your outer self appear the way it should be. Because we can not say that we're depressed as African Americans. We cannot express anxiety as African Americans, because that makes us weak, especially as African American men. But if we change the way we feel on the inside, it will allow us to think better and understand what we're going through a little bit better. I want you to go to that next slide because I think this is so important. I know you're going to share that.
Well, next slide. This is my practice. It's Think Psychological and Consulting Services. My website is thinkpsychology.com. I provide a host of services from psychoeducational evaluations to counseling and consultation. And then I'm also working on my new businesses, strictly focused on psychoeducational evaluations, autism, special education needs, behavioral and emotional evaluations as well. And that's called the Arizona Multidisciplinary Testing Evaluation Center. And that's it for me.
Thank you.
I would like to say thank you all for taking the time to listen. Thank you all for coming out. Thank you for inviting me. I certainly do appreciate it. Thank you so much.
And I know this is something that, I know we have some questions out, so we're going to have a few questions for you, but this is something I was sharing with Dr. Logan earlier that I think should be really addressed. This actually should have been the beginning of our presentation, but I'll share a little bit. Maricopa County actually did a survey, and they do a survey all the time. It's called Community Health Needs Assessment. They do it every other year. And I want you to hear this. In 2019, the top 3 health concerns were alcohol and substance abuse, in this order, overweight and obesity, and mental health. In 2021, in this order, the top 3 concerns were mental health, overweight and obesity, and alcohol. So what happened is mental health flipped. And the rationale behind that was because we did not know how to prepare ourselves. It's called prevention, spiritually, mentally, and of course with the obesity and overweight, physically. Today, everyone, I want you to hear this, and I know Dr. Pullins have questions out there. What this message today is actually helping us prepare ourselves. You may not be going through anything, but it's helping you to prepare to share this with others and helping you to prepare if you do go through those things. How do I adapt? How do I address those concerns? And that's what I want you to think about. Do we have any questions in the audience? And do we have any questions on our virtual platform?
There are no current questions on Facebook, YouTube, but luckily we have some in the house.
Okay.
I'm Paul Rogers. Dr. Logan, I know that all of us have issues and problems. All of us limp. We got a limp. All of us got a limp. But the question is, have you done any studies to determine if people who are not attending church or serving God, that there's a higher propensity to have mental issues?
Ooh, you're killing me right now. That's a loaded question, right? So the direct answer is no. I have not personally done any research on the tendency for individuals who are not churchgoers to experience high instances of mental health issues. I will, now that that question has been asked, I'll do a little bit of research on that. But my thought would be that the church provides one of the things that we talked about, right? So it provides an extra support system to help individuals deal with mental health and psychologically based issues, right? We talked about that connectiveness, right, as another important thing, right? So it provides another way to connect with others, okay? It provides a foundation. Some churches even have counselors, pastoral counselors, right, that help the church members work through different psychological and mental health issues. So my professional guess would be the church is a good place that helps individuals deal with psychological and mental health issues. Whether or not going to church would increase the likelihood that you had more issues, mental health issues, I don't know that would be the case, because individuals might do something else that might serve in a capacity that a church would for individuals that go to church, for instance, right? So I don't know. It's a pretty good question, and I think the research would be very, very interesting on that one. But I'll definitely try to check that out.
And I'll also throw this in. Our pastor often shares that church is our foundation. And so I think, when we often hear presentations, at the very end of the presentations, they have what are called references. And references are things that people go back to see if the information that is provided in the presentation is credible. So our reference has always been the Bible, and I would say even during our pastor's messages during the Wednesday night services, he's referencing certain areas. If you're going through anxiety, this is where you go. If you're going through depression, this is where you go. And I think that's so interesting that a lot of people, when we have church in-house, and Pastor talks about this all the time, you're focused because you're listening to him. But if you are having service at home, and I'm not speaking just because those who don't come, when you're having service at home, you're distracted. There's a lot that's going on around you, so you may not be truly hearing that word. So I think that's one of the things that we may want to point out. And when you do your research, reference the Bible, please. So
Right. Well, so as you were talking, I had a thought, right? So, and this is what I would say to that. I think that the belief in a higher power is the thing that separates those who have significant challenges with mental health versus those that have less significant challenges with mental health, right? And so with that being said, and I'm making a distinction, right, between higher power and church, because I think there's people that have a belief in the higher power that don't necessarily subscribe to a particular religious doctrine, right? But I think it isn't necessarily religious doctrine, but the belief that you have that's in something that's greater than yourself is the thing that ultimately helps you, engage when things get a little bit wacky and they don't make sense to the rational mind, right? And you have something that you can look to beyond that. You have Jesus Christ, you have church, you have these other religions that you can look to, or you have no religion, but you believe in spirituality. You believe in a higher power. You believe in something that's bigger than you. If you have that, I think you're in a good space, more so than others that don't have it at all. Okay.
We do have a couple more questions
Yes.
out.
Hi, Dr. Logan. Thank you for what you've shared today. I really came running after last week's session to hear from this week. And one of the things they mentioned last week was about the mental health impact on the youth because of long-term COVID. And I noticed that your new business, you said, deals with evaluating and testing young people for autism. Is there a component in that program, or what would be a strategy you would suggest for educators to think about as we deal with these students on a day-to-day basis in schools because of this mental health issue with young people now because of COVID?
So strategies, to understand your question, strategies
So
to
a
help,
strategy for educators. that would
strategies
help
for
them
educators to
deal with
help
that.
children with
Yes.
cope that been dealing with things with COVID.
Right, from a mental health perspective.
So from a mental health perspective, I think one of the best things that you can do with children in particular is to be honest, right? So I think a lot of times we try to keep certain things from kids without knowing that kids already know, right? Because they have access to phones, iPads, computers, the internet. So they have a lot of information. So as educators, I think one of the best things we can do is be honest about what's happening, what's going on, why we have certain things in place. And not only that, meet kids where they are. Okay, if wherever they are, you meet them right there. Okay, So one of the bigger things, and I've been in schools for, I don't know, over 25 years. So one of the biggest things I tell educators to do in general, and this is a more, like you said, preventative strategy, develop relationships with your kids, right? I think that's probably the single most important thing that you can do as an educator to help when crisis strikes, right? So we want to be proactive. We want to know if Angela is looking off today, different, acting different, not the usual bubbly Angela that I'm used to seeing, right? So then we can have those conversations. Then we can pull them aside and say, you know, how you doing today? You're not your usual self today. We want to be able to recognize when a student comes in and they're dressed to the nines and they're looking good, or they look good, right? And they're giving out candy and they're giving out gifts, and some of their favorite stuff they might even bring in. Here, have this and have that. We want to be able to understand what that might mean. We want to be able to understand that might mean this young person is contemplating suicide, right? And we only can understand that if we know the person, right? So having those relationships with kids, I think, is one of the single most important things you can do. And it's real simple. And I tell teachers this all the time. And I do it every day with kids. Compliment a kid on something. Just say something nice. Them some cool shoes you have on. That could be ran into the ground, right? But you don't realize how much a small compliment means to a kid that don't hear it. They don't hear it like that. Ooh, you looking sharp today? Who did your hair, girl? Right? Ooh, look at that book bag. Man, you looking sharp. That's a cool new mask you got. Who got that for you? Oh, wait, where'd you get that jacket from? Look at them earrings, girl. Small stuff, right? And when you start there, when kids have problems associated with the pandemic or otherwise, they'll be more likely to come to you. You'll be more likely to recognize it when they don't come to you. You'll be more likely to recognize small and subtle changes in their behavior if you know them, if you have a relationship with them. Teachers are amazed when I can come into their classroom and transact change with a student that they've been fighting with for the last 45 minutes. And I come in there and they, come here, boy. Yes, Dr. Logan. They want me to teach him how to do it. And I say, talk to him. When the last time you told him his haircut was nice? When the last time you recognized he had a haircut? You see what I'm saying? These are things I look for things to say to kids when I see them in the morning. I'm intentional about it, right? I'm looking for it. I'm looking to give them a compliment. I'm looking for the connection. I had a kid, this kid came in, this is last year at my school. This little boy, every day, wears, you know, the hunter hats, they fur on the inside, they got ear flaps that come down.
Arizona?
In Arizona. Every day. Every day. I'm talking about when it got hot, it doesn't matter. I met this young man, hat here, flaps, fur, mask. I couldn't even see his face. Every day. Didn't really speak to me, but I did duty in the morning, so I would speak to him every day. His name was Christopher. Hey, Chris. How you doing, Chris? He'd give me a head nod. All year. What up, Chris? Man, you ain't hot today with the hat? Nah. All right, you looking good. Okay, cool. Never knocked the hat. You know, said something. It was his thing, right? Chris never really talked to me. One day, I think it was Christmas time, Chris walked up and handed me $5. Like, Merry Christmas, I want to give you this, right? This out the blue. Of course, I didn't take it. You know, I said, oh, thank you so much, Chris, but I can't take your money, right? But just me speaking to him, just saying, hi, good morning, how you doing, Chris? Every day, we made that connection. And even though it wasn't a lot of verbal back and forth from him, you know, he demonstrated the connection by, you know, gesturing to give me a gift. Right? Money even, right? $5 is a lot to kids. You know what I mean? So that meant a lot to me, that he would do that. You know, and it said what I was doing was important to him. Okay? So, you know, to your question, start with the small things. And when big things arise, you'll be more likely to have a better opportunity to address it in a positive way and transact the change you're looking for. Right.
Another question? No questions?
Oh,
Okay. So, Dr. Logan, I think that's phenomenal. I want to say, as I shared the story again regarding the student that had taken his life, this was 20 years ago that I had, obviously, interaction with these students. And he is so correct. The relationship that I have with I still call them my students, you know, it's important that you have to interact. Even though I was the principal, but these students would actually get in trouble just to come to the office because they knew that I would talk to them. And I would close the door, and when they came out, walked out of my office, they had the pink slip, you know what that was, and they would smile and say thank you. And my office staff would say, "You are the only principal I've ever known that would suspend a student and they're smiling." It wasn't the fact that there was a suspension, it was the fact that I sat in that office and I talked to them. And I think if you listen to what he's saying, all of those pictures that you saw earlier, I want you to go back and listen to those stories. Somebody said, "I remember when he changed." Somebody said in that Michigan situation, because I'm from Michigan, I remember hearing the story. The parents said, "I remember when he changed." There was one of the teachers, "I remember when he changed." If we understand, and I think this is important for our teachers and even anywhere, if we understand and we interact with our children, you don't have to be the teacher. If we interact with our children and we let them know, and I call them our children because it's the community in which we are living in, and we let them know how much we care about them. And if we see that there's that slight change, tell somebody, do something about it. Talk to their parents, talk to law enforcement if you have to, because we can stop a whole lot just by the communication that we have. We've talked about mental health with youth. We've talked about mental health as a whole. We talked about mental health as something that we don't see, but what we experience and what we see as a change in individuals. And I wanted to say thank you, Dr. Logan. This has been phenomenal. I've learned a lot. I'm going to go back and look at this video. I'm going to share with family members and friends because we have been through a lot. The data that I shared with you is true. Maricopa County has stated mental health is number one. And we know that. We just actually acknowledged that in last month. And I know we have Mental Health Month, but it's Mental Health Year. Every day we see something going on, and we don't want to, but we do. And so we have to do something about it. If you see something, say something, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And just, you know, to kind of wrap it up, I think you hit the nail on the head. It's all about relationships at the end of the day, particularly with the young folks in schools, you know, developing those relationships early on before a crisis.
And as we end, I want to give credit. I know we're going to go to the last slide to talk about our next presentations that's coming up, but I want to give credit to our pastor and our First Lady, our pastor, who will be coming up, Pastor Jonathan. I'm going to say this without the claps. Pastor Jonathan E. Logan, Dr. Jonathan Logan. No relationship, I believe, but we don't know.
We got to figure this thing out here. All
Yeah,
these
we're going to
Logans.
figure that out. And then also our First Lady, it was because of the interaction and the relationship our First Lady had with Dr. Logan. She met him at a restaurant. They started to, you know, First Lady, she going to talk to everybody. She saw this gentleman, hi, blah, 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 and she realized what he did. Bam, we have this wonderful speaker, which actually happened to be my friend. I know him. I was like, I know him. And so basically just having that interaction was phenomenal. So without further ado, we're going to have our pastor come up, and I know he'll stand here, so you will stay here. But I just want to share with you that we have some hot topics. I want this room to be packed. We do have our raffled gift. That raffle gift, for those who are in virtual land, you'll miss out because we passed out our tickets. It's a Starbucks card and 3 yoga sessions so that we can have our mental health. So that's for those who are in-house. But for those who, if you want to join us in the next few weeks, next week we'll be talking about coalitions against cancer. So it's not just the Coalitions of Blacks Against Cancer. We're looking at breast cancer, prostate cancer. Our very own Mayo Clinic will be here. We're also going to be talking about grief and loss, and we're going to focus on ambiguous loss. If you don't know that term, look it up, and you'll hear more about it during that time. We're also going to look at emergency preparedness, financial planning, and investments. I got off the phone with the gentleman who was on vacation. He was excited, and he said, I got a lot of things I'm going to talk about. He's going to be giving out free financial books, how to record different things. I was like, wow, this is going to be excellent. And then, of course, we're going to find out where we come from. The genealogy person is going to speak at the very end of our session. So we have some hot topics. I'm excited. I hope you're excited. And now we're going to ask our very own Pastor Jonathan E. Logan, Dr. Jonathan E. Logan, to come and close us out.
Thank you so much. Let me stand back here so that I have my back to the audience. Thank you, Dr. Logan.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Allen, for just an awesome presentation. The first thing I want to say tonight is simply this. It's almost criminal for you to experience this and not tell relatives and friends so that they can experience it as well. You can have them to go and download our app. They can go on Facebook, and they can get this valuable information. The second thing I'd like to share is it's very important when you are dealing with different disciplines that you realize that these disciplines complement each other. It's important that, as a pastor, I have to understand that the spiritual dimension of life is just one aspect of life. I need psychologists, I need sociologists to help me to better understand. I need physical doctors to help me better understand the human experience. So we don't want to rail on other disciplines. We want to be complementary. I think that's very, very important. And so many times in the church, we think we lift the spiritual dimension to a point that we disrespect other disciplines that are equally valuable. I've said this, a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. From a spiritual perspective, the enemy is going to attack you in the dimension of your life that you're the weakest. And either one of those weakened dimensions can destroy your life. For instance, if you're not socially adept, then your inability to get along with people can lead to your demise. You get in an argument, the person loses their temper, and you die. Of course, we know if you don't take care of yourself physically, the problems that can cause. But if you're not psychologically astute, that means your judgment is off and you make faulty decisions. So what I want us to learn is stop trying to lift one discipline above the other and realize that these disciplines are complementary and they all are a part of the human experience. That is what we're trying to do here at Antioch, even with the Summer Health Series, is to balance out your understanding of life. The Bible is a book that deals with all of the disciplines, and therefore we need to respect those disciplines. Can I get a witness? Amen. That's so important. And so, Dr. Logan, thank you.
Thank you.
That
Thank
is
you so much for
weird to
having me.
hear someone calling my name. That is so weird. But we're gonna have to talk and see if we're related. But thank you, Dr. Allen. Thank you, Dr. Pullins, and thank you both our audiences here in the church and those who are online. We're standing. I would just simply say this to you. Believe it or not, as one of our speakers shared with us, I believe last week, that we are not out of the pandemic. We are still in this pandemic. And as a result of that, we have members that are still being infected with this virus. Granted, most of them have been boosted appropriately, and therefore they're not hospitalized and their symptoms have been mild. And so we want to thank God for them having the wisdom to take the vaccine, take the boosters, so that they can protect themselves and their families. So I just want you to keep that in mind. You're going to see a lot of people that's very cavalier about this. But you need to act as if you are informed. You know, because we've heard from one of the foremost experts, that what we need to do to protect ourselves and to protect our families. Let us bow. Lord Jesus, we are so grateful for the opportunities that you put before us to live life on the highest level, highest plane. We realize that, Lord, because you're giving us outstanding speakers who are giving us tremendous knowledge. Now, Lord, we pray that we would take this knowledge in and would apply it in our lives and share it with others so that they can apply it in their lives as well. We pray for those who are even listening online. Lord, help them to realize the importance of being informed. Lord, your word says our people are destroyed because of a lack of knowledge. Help us, oh God, not to allow that to happen to us. Now, Lord, as we leave this place tonight, watch over us and protect us. Let no hurt, harm, or danger come nigh unto us. We are asking it in the name of Jesus Christ, the Son of the living God. And everyone said, Amen. greet your neighbor, and just let them know how much you appreciate them being here. God bless you.